Saluto tutti a questa nuova edizione dei Lab Talk promossi dal Laboratorio Aperto di Ferrara in partnership con i Laboratori Aperti di Modena, Piacenza, Forlì e Ravenna. Saluto Marco Villa di Blue Spark che ha dato la disponibilità a essere oggi con noi. Sembra che abbiamo un problema di connessione con Alfredo, che speriamo di riuscire a risolvere nel corso del talk. Quindi chiederò uno sforzo particolare a Marco, come dire, a fare da sparring con me. Il tema evidentemente di oggi era ed è internazionalizzare le startup. Intanto una premessa generale su cosa sono i Lab Talk, principale format online di divulgazione sui temi dell'innovazione, dell'imprenditorialità e del cambiamento tecnologico promosso dai Laboratori Aperti. Ci sembrava importantissimo, a maggior ragione in un momento come questo, che travolti dall'emergenza del Covid, pone una domanda di come le imprese, in particolare quelle meno coperte dal punto di vista della regolamentazione e anche da parte della mano pubblica, qual è il ruolo dell'internazionalizzazione, qual è il ruolo della connessione tra ecosistemi. Siamo in un momento in cui c'è una frammentazione evidentemente delle comunicazioni e degli scambi, e quindi questo era un tema che ci sembrava particolarmente importante. Le start-up rimangono un grandissimo volano di crescita, di sviluppo, dove si concentra un'altissima intensità di qualità del capitale umano. Abbiamo la disponibilità oggi a parlare con noi di Marco, amico, partner, collega, che in questo momento è a Singapore, tra i founder di Blue Spark, che è una... Ecco Alfredo. Benissimo. Hi Alfredo.
Yes. Hi,
Ciao.
I'm very sorry for joining late. I am
Don't
here.
worry. I am just introducing the webinar, so don't worry, it's a pleasure to hear back from you. Quindi
Happy
ora
to be here.
facciamo uno shift in inglese. From one
Ma io
side...
capisco, it's okay.
As you prefer,
Okay.
as you prefer, Alfredo. It's not a problem either for me or for
Okay.
Marco, and people and participants were informed in advance. So, Marco Villa, Blue Spark Hub, placed in Singapore and acting globally. From the other side, Alfredo Coppola, US MEC, with a particular experience and track record in accelerating and working in supporting exchanges between different ecosystems. So if our guests are fine, I will try to introduce some questions and then 5 minutes each, so that the discussion can be as interesting, as much as interesting as possible, and then let's have some room for Q&A. So I would start with Marco. We are used to think to internationalization for corporation companies. It's an issue for small and medium enterprises. What does it mean for a startup going international?
Well, for a startup, well, first of all, good evening, everybody, and well, thanks for the invitation, and thanks for the question, which it's a basic question, but it's a fundamental one, because well, in my experience, startup internationalization of startups, and going either regional, global, or anyway outside of our home country. In this case, let's look at Italy specifically. It's one of the most fascinating topics, and also one of the most difficult ones. My experience as previously as an investor. I'm an investor today as well, but that's less. I'm dedicating less time into finding new investments at the moment, and looking at many startups from Italy with a lot of potential, but at the same time a difficulty in going global, or a difficulty in scaling up, to be more precise. And well, the reason being, well, fundamentally two. The first one is if you are in a startup operating in Italy, you know that you're part of a good ecosystem, but it's not one of the top ecosystems in the world when it comes to availability of financing, etc. So despite and good that we have a lot of few new initiatives recently, but Italy is still not one of the big ecosystems in the world. So you have that challenge, and then you have the second challenge, which is going international with a startup. What basically means having a clear plan, or at least the beginning of a clear plan that will be pivoted many times. But you need to have a plan, and you need to have an international mindset from day one. And at the same time, you have to be ready to do what internationalization means in terms of the demand on your finances, on your time, as founders, as startup, as team members of a startup. Your time, your finances, the fact that the life of a global startup means being in a lot of places all at once, means being able to effectively run a dispersed team. It means it means a lot of stuff, which sounds very reasonable. And normally when I say this to people, they all say, well, of course, we are well aware of that. But at the same time, when they then try it, not very few, but certainly not many teams are actually ready or necessarily have what it takes to achieve what it takes. And also because patience is another important element, especially in certain markets, and we could talk forever about that, but especially in certain markets, going international is not as simple as doing a quick acceleration program, or doing a couple of visits, or go to a trade fair, or even traveling for a couple of, even for a month. It means, again, understanding what's in a particular ecosystem for you, which one is the right one, and be prepared to invest a significant amount of time and resources into the operation.
Thanks, Marco. Thanks for managing and staying within the 5 minutes. So, Alfredo, at least to me, one of the points raised by Marco is the clear link between getting an internationalization and the possibility to scale up. Please take the floor.
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me on your panel today. It's sunny in San Francisco, and it's about 15 minutes to 7 o'clock in the morning. So I'm glad we can make all the timing work. And a bit of background about our organization. We run an accelerator in San Francisco in Menlo Park, where we help foreign companies to enter the global market through Silicon Valley. We have had the pleasure of bringing through maybe about 60 startups through our programs from Italy. And it makes me very proud, because my original family is from Italy, so I'm very excited about that. So when we talk about, like what Marco said, not all the companies really have what it takes to succeed on a global scale. It's important that that a founder goes through an important mindset shift. And that is really from imagining that your best success could be becoming a €2 million company, which is still a very healthy company, and you can have a good staff and you have a nice house, a nice lifestyle relatively, but that is keeping pretty much a local business. So what we are interested in learning, and who has the right mindset, who can develop the mindset for actually going into a different state of mind to achieve huge success, maybe a €1 billion corporation. So, you know, that is a very, very big jump from doing 2 million to 1 billion. And having the confidence and the belief that you can achieve this is actually more important than the technology that you are, your innovation within your company. So a lot of the things that we look at is whether the founding team can develop such a mindset. The advisors and mentors and partners that would surround a CEO who is going to go from maybe 2 million euro to eventually 1 billion is a series of different defined stages. And this is something that the Silicon Valley ecosystem is very good at. In fact, Silicon Valley is very rarely considered the access to the US market is considered the access to the global market. And that is very exciting, but of course it's incredibly competitive when you to do that. So how do you get that mindset? Well, in a series of different ways. Primarily, you know, the founders need to be committed to growth. And how do you get the confidence to have that commitment? Really, it starts at an early age of getting inspired by leaders and others who have done it before, and whether they believe they can achieve what others have done. So it is something that takes some time to develop this mindset, but once you do get it, it's amazing to watch it happen in action. And the thing that Silicon Valley is very good at is getting this idea of scaling fast. And by scaling fast, we're not just talking about, you know, 15 to 20% growth per year. It's 15 to 20% growth per month.
Thanks, Alfredo. Couple of points raised by Alfredo bring me to the following question, Marco. No? First of all, quite often when talking and discussing about startups and entrepreneurship, we talk about ecosystems. So I would ask both, how would you define ecosystems and why it is so important, the connection between them?
Marco, will you go first?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. I was waiting to know. Well, obviously, and I mean, being in Silicon Valley, Alfredo knows this better than anybody. The for a startup to grow almost to any level that is not purely local, the ecosystem is well, the ecosystem is key, which is one of the it's one of the main challenges in Italy. It's always been, you know, everybody wants to be the new Silicon Valley, but only Silicon Valley can be the new Silicon Valley. Every region, when I was still based in Italy, and I'm back often, and I was speaking to conferences, every single province, region, municipality in Italy wanted to become the new Silicon Valley. Then I started going abroad, and every single region, city abroad wanted to become the new Silicon Valley. But there's only one Silicon Valley, but there is more than one. There is more than one valid ecosystem, and which one is the right one for each startup is defined by a variety of factors, including the characteristics of the startup, the mindset of the entrepreneur, what we believe the primary market for that product or service will be, the capacity of investing money and time, the type of the sector, of course, and so on and so forth. But I mean, normally when we speak about ecosystems, well, what we really talk about is the capacity of a place in this case, and both, you know, Singapore at the end of the day, it's an island, and Silicon Valley is a relatively small area itself. So you don't have gigantic ecosystems. You know, that China is not an ecosystem. Shanghai is an ecosystem. Beijing is an ecosystem. The US is not an ecosystem. Silicon Valley is, the Boston area is a different one. New York is a different one. But what do they have in common is the presence of a variety of factors, and specifically, normally, access to capital, access to talent, connectivity, access to universities, and a certain quality of universities, and together these elements. There is an initiative called the Startup Genome that basically measures all the different elements of an ecosystem. So if you want, it's easy, you just Google it, and then you will find out that, I think in the last one, Silicon Valley was the first ecosystem in the world, with Singapore being the 12th, but the first in Asia, apart from China. And in this case, obviously, operating in an ecosystem is in an ecosystem that works is a big advantage. I mean, you pay the price of moving somewhere else, but at the same time, you are in a situation where you can easily speak to 3, 4, 5 venture capitalists in one day. You go to 3 events, and you're part of. There's this community sense. Although now it's all about social distancing, but even within this framework, and hopefully in the not so distant future, the community of entrepreneurs that you find yourself into, so that you don't feel isolated, is probably one of the main positives of being immersed in an ecosystem. And whether you're part of a more structured acceleration program or less structured ones, the community element is always a main driver of development, and makes you feel a little bit less lonely. And another point, and I'm gonna leave it to Alfredo after this, is also the connection between ecosystems, because even within the world, there are certain ecosystems that are stronger than others, and we already said that at the beginning. The other interesting point is that these ecosystems are connected among them. So even if you want to, let's say, if you need to go global starting from Silicon Valley, you go global starting from Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley is a connected ecosystem to the other top ecosystems in the world. It's easier to do it from there than from anybody else. Same thing for Singapore. Singapore is considered to be #1 in global connectedness in the Startup Genome ranking. It's the most connected place, and therefore it's an ecosystem that is growing. At the same time, is the most connected. So also accessing other top ecosystem is easier from a developed one. So it's really a virtuous circle. It's a self-fulfilling process. If you start playing on that type of playground, and in your mindset and your product and your idea and your team allow that to happen, then obviously you will play a different game.
Thanks, Marco. I think very interesting points. Ecosystems as a composite of talents, capital, and connectivity, and also this nice referral to self-fulfilling places. So, Alfredo, is this the case also from the US?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and just to finish up on what Marco said, if you want to go to do business in Asia, Marco is in a perfect place. I think Singapore is always considered the gateway, the friendly gateway to the rest of Asia. So if you want to do business in Southeast Asia or other parts of the region, then it makes sense to do it through Singapore. So Diego, you found a very good connection on the other side. So on Silicon Valley side, it is true. It's probably considered by many to be the benchmark for the perfect ecosystem. And I learned this very quickly. I've been living here for nearly 15 years and, coming from Canada. and it is very unique. I've done business in many parts of the world, and this is totally unique. And what really makes the ecosystem perfect is the absolute amazing way that all the partners that surround a startup, all the unique elements that support a startup community work together. So I'm talking about angel investors and venture capitalists. We're talking about the corporations, universities, governments, even though it's a very minimal role for governments, and all the professional services organizations like lawyers and bankers and tax specialists. So as a company grows from 0 to 2 million, 2 million to 50 million, 50 million to 1 billion, there's a different set of experts, mentors, advisors, consultants that work with each company as they grow through this phase. And it's almost like everybody went to the same school or got the same memo. They know how to do it. They know that when a company reaches 2 million in revenue, it's a different set of skills that needs to take it to the next 50 million. It's quite amazing. But the aspect that stands out to me compared to any part of the world, and this happened in the last 6 years, is Silicon Valley has attracted more than 400, probably 500 multinational corporations to set up their innovation offices here. So it truly is a global gateway. For example, if you're from Milano and you want to do business in Germany or UK, it's actually going to be faster for you to come to the Silicon Valley office of British Telecom or Deutsche Bank or BMW, because the people that are running the office in Palo Alto or San Francisco, they have one job, and that job is to review innovative products. If you try to go to Munich or London to try to find the teams that are responsible for testing and doing POCs with new products, it'd be very difficult to find those individuals, and likely it will take you 5 times longer to build those relationships. So it is very ironic when we look at the accelerator programs that we are running. We had my favorite story is a company from Tokyo who was doing an augmented reality gaming company, gaming product. And in his backyard, literally, 3 kilometers away, was the Sony headquarters in Tokyo. And they kept rejecting him. They said, no, keep coming, come back to see us when you're making money. But when we set up a meeting for him at Sony of America in San Jose, he got the POC signed within 6 weeks. So it's very ironic, you have to come here to do business in your backyard. But that is the way it works. The innovation offices from these multinational corporations have one mandate, and that is to look at primarily the innovation coming from Silicon Valley, which is approximately 30,000 startups that you will have access to at any given time. But because people are coming from all over the world, then you can also have those meetings with the multinational corporations while you are here. So that is what I call a bonus that occurred. We did not see it coming. The Startup Genome group that Marco mentioned have also studied this phenomenon, and I've not been able to keep up to the numbers, but I think it's close to about 500 corporations that are here. So it's a very exciting place. And even though we are shifting from doing physical events to online events now, the opportunities, still remain very high.
Thanks, Alfredo. Well, I personally met Alfredo a couple of years ago. We were working together in supporting young entrepreneurs coming from Sardinia regions. It was a very interesting and challenging program. Then I am aware that Marco with Blue Spark has a very interesting program that is called Southeast Asia Check-in Program. So the question and the point I would like to receive some consideration is, California and Singapore are for sure incredible places, but aren't too much unique for Italian startups. So what could be the added value for the Italian startups of these ecosystems?
Should I start again?
Yeah.
Well, each place is unique, as as you look, the process of internationalization. One of the reasons that I got attracted to Singapore at some point, I mean, I started coming here for other reasons, was precisely because the ecosystems are all interesting, but they're also very different. And Singapore has characteristics interesting for certain startups or scale-ups, if you prefer, at some point in their development. Let me give you an example. One of the reasons that makes Singapore interesting is, for instance, one thing that, when you look at all your possibilities, I remember there's a story of one of the startups that I personally invested in, Spreaker, that is now being acquired and operating in the US. They had the right mindset, but they went to Silicon Valley too early. Or at least too early for them, or without the right partners. I don't know. Like I don't want to go into that now. But for instance, for them, Silicon Valley was not the right place. A couple of months later, they found the right intermediate ecosystem to grow in Berlin, and 1 year later, they moved to New York. And they have been in New York ever since, and they've been acquired, and that has been their own. So for others, instead, Singapore is different from Silicon Valley in many ways, but one of the ways is certainly here the role of government is much stronger. And as an Italian, whenever I'm trained to think of the role of government and start running away as fast as I can. But in the case of Singapore, they actually managed to turn a minor hub into the primary hub for Southeast Asia and one of the top 3 or 4 in the world. So we have to say that in the sense that in terms of matching funds, matching VC money, but also being a little bit directive towards the sector. I mean, Singapore is great for healthcare, diagnostic, biotech, advanced manufacturing, because that's also where the government, what the government is looking at, a smart solution for smart cities and fin. Okay, if you do something else, not necessarily Singapore is necessarily your place from day one. What is interesting is compared to others, so I'm focusing on the uniqueness now rather than what is similar with others. Let's see what is different, especially with Silicon Valley, just because we are talking about them now, but generally speaking, obviously there is less competition here, so it's a little bit, having spent quite a lot of time in Silicon Valley, it's fantastic, it's very dynamic, but it's also very competitive. Singapore is also competitive, but to a different level. It's a little less, and there is, and the fact that the government is looking at promoting Singapore as the hub for at least Asia, not only Southeast Asia, but at least Asia, but for some also global hub. Dyson, for instance, just moved there. The headquarters in Singapore because quality of the research and the technical capability and of the talent. So if we bring all of this together, we have a place which is smaller. It's big. In comparison, it's bigger than Italy, much smaller than Silicon Valley, with certain unique characteristics. So, for instance, just to give you an example, we do have a fair amount of Italian founders that they founded their own startup here. They didn't move it from Italy; they found it here, like Stashaway, for just to mention one. And they are basically they help you with your investment using AI. Or another one is that at the moment it's an interesting case because they started here. Their international growth they are in fish tech. They didn't want to look at the US because in the US there are already some competitors with the same business model, no one in Asia. So they said, okay, we want to maybe become interesting for the US market after we've grown, and therefore Singapore for us is the place to start. So just to give you a couple of examples of and apart from that, then obviously is also an incredibly easy place to set up a business. I mean, it does have its own perks in terms of, it's very straightforward. Taxes are low, much lower than the US, and so on and so forth. These considerations might not be the most important ones for a startup, but they become actually quite useful to know at some point. So all in all, we're looking at a unique place in terms of stronger government presence, but in a virtuous way. I have to admit it, to the point that we are starting seeing a smaller version of what Alfredo was also mentioning. Philip Morris, for instance, the main research center is here. You will be surprised to know that Ferrero Nutella, Ferrero, the most Italian company of Italian companies, they have their innovation center in Singapore Science Park. So it's a similar dynamic really to what Alfredo was discussing on a smaller, more specific case than maybe Silicon Valley is.
Thanks, Marco. Please, Alfredo.
Yeah, thank you. So as Marco said, yeah, Silicon Valley is definitely the real land of opportunity, but of course it comes with the layer of incredibly competitive. So, I can say about 23% of the startups that go through our programs are successful in getting customers. 17% are successful in getting funding. So you think, wow, those numbers are pretty low. But even if you are a Silicon Valley homegrown startup, still the numbers are quite low because, as you probably know, many startups, they last less than 2 years and then they go down and then they start a new one. The founders start a new one. So it's very typical for a successful entrepreneur, even born in Silicon Valley, to have gone through 3 or 4, sometimes up to 6 startups before they become successful. The failures help them to learn. But anyway, getting to the question of what are the unique opportunities for Italian companies, I think there are certain areas that Italy is certainly dominating in the areas of like automotive innovation, food, nutrition, some aspects of health and life sciences. So these are the areas, and advanced manufacturing, of course. So I would think if Italian companies in those sectors, there's definitely opportunities here. One of the first things they need to do is adjust their strategy. Typically what we see is companies from other parts of the world, they're doing 5 to 10 different things to make money. And when you come here, you really have to focus on the one, maximum 2 things, but usually just one thing within that tech sector that you are going to be the best in the world at. And then that is one important milestone to achieve. And then the second one is to partner with the right people who are missing that link. And then you can be part of this, this wave of opportunity. It is sometimes difficult for people to make that transition because they come from an area where they're reasonably good at doing many things. But here we are looking for things that are, we want you to be the best at one thing, at one component of the sector. Excuse me. So we are working with an Italian company now from Bologna that is doing ozone, using ozone technology in agriculture. So they already went through an important phase they were doing many things before this in Italy, and now they are focused exclusively on the way they use ozone as a way to reduce the toxicity in insecticides in the agricultural sector. So we think they have a strong opportunity here, but they have a long way to go. But these are, if I boil it down to some sectors, I would say in the areas like I mentioned before: food, advanced manufacturing, automotive, robotics to some extent, and also in agriculture as well.
Thanks, Alfredo. Let me ask you, because you made some references before during the conversation. How are you coping with the situation now of the COVID, due to the COVID? How did you manage to adapt or partially adapt your activities and programs in a context where there are restrictions to mobility, to exchanges? How did you move part of the activities online or in a remote way?
So that's a question to me first?
Yeah, Alfredo, please.
Okay, yeah. So, you know, I got to admit, the first 2 weeks was a shock. It all happened so suddenly. And because both my business partner and I spend most of our time on airplanes, yeah, there was a shock to the system. We had to postpone many of our travel activities. But the truth is, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to do business, you have to continue to do business. And of course, unless you're in the airline industry or the travel industry, and some other sectors that were negatively affected by the crisis, everybody else needs to keep doing business. So making good connections, we do them online. Doing conferences and training and boot camps, we do that online. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But where there's a will and you have no other choice, you make it work. We're actually excited. We're doing our first online boot camp starting on Monday with some startups from Ukraine. And for them, it's going to be in the evening, and for us, it's the morning. You make it work. But what is most exciting is we have launched a new program that we put together very quickly called Thriving in the Storm. And we realized that it's specifically designed for companies that are doing maybe €500,000 to €1 million per year. We know that the EU is giving out relief funds, but primarily that money is going to be used just to stay alive, to pay some salaries. But still, we're going to see some startups dying, and that's horrible. Nobody wants that, because eventually people are going to go on unemployment insurance, cost more. So what we want to do is save the companies that were doing some business. And what we have set up in Silicon Valley are expert teams that have been through previous crises, not just the one in 2008 financial crisis, but also from the NASDAQ crash in 2000. And of course, the crash that happened in the 9/11, after 9/11. And these advisors will help a company not only extend their runway, like make the most of the finances they have, but most importantly, to identify the white space in the market that's being created by the disruption that nobody could predict, and identify those new opportunities. New markets will emerge. Some are obvious, some are not. And one thing is for sure is that most of these young entrepreneurs, they lack the experience, they lack the probably lack the advisory boards that usually are the guys who help people navigate storms like this. So, you know, so we rebounded quite quickly, and we're going to be helping our first set of these distressed companies starting on May 3rd from Spain. So we look forward to that.
Very nice and charming label for the program. Marco, so entrepreneurs should focus on their business and should continue to work on it. Does the check-in program fits or manage to adapt to this situation? Please.
So sorry, Diego, you were breaking up on my side.
Sorry,
so,
just to ask you.
We said, does the check-in program, and then I missed the rest of the question.
Does the check-in program that you run fits with the situation? Has some specific features that were useful to adapt to the COVID situation, or the kind of activities that Blue Spark is running in this moment are in a lockdown of like people?
Yeah, I mean, pretty similar to what Alfredo said, but in a less organized fashion, because we are younger and a little more informal as an organization at the moment. But it's the same with one difference, which is that in the case of Singapore, our light lockdown, which is called a circuit breaker here, because they don't want to call it lockdown. So it's a lighter lockdown, but it's actually fairly recent. It's only a couple of weeks. Until a couple of weeks ago, we were still able to not maybe get people from outside, but at least do meetings and see people within Singapore. Now, for the next few weeks, this is not going to be possible, and pretty much the same way. Maybe we are a couple of weeks later, but we are trying to adapt because we have to. We are trying to find, what's the smartest way to do a few boot camps and webinars and all the rest of that. I mean, we know this is not going to be forever, but at the same time, we also know that we are in an interesting position. Not only us, in this case, actually, US is one of those. I think the BBC recently published a study on what are the countries that are more likely to rebound from the COVID situation faster and better than anybody else. And Singapore was one of the top 5. So we remain optimistic on the fact that for certain startups in certain sectors is going to be still an opportunity. The opportunity is still alive. It's going to come back. We're just adapting the way to get them closer to this part of the world at the time when we cannot travel. But yeah, what we're optimistic about is the fact that the fundamentals are strong. The system seems to be coping decently well. It's transparent. It's efficient as much as efficient as it can be in this situation. So we are trying to put a patch on while we actually wait for things to go back closer to normality.
Thanks. Well, last round of exchanges. Still an opportunity. Let's focus on the business Alfredo was saying. So 3 tips from each one of you for startups interested to scale up and looking at Singapore and the Silicon. Marco, please start.
Okay, well, it's really for startups looking for scale up in general. We've maybe a little bit of a Singaporean flavor, but just to, it's an opportunity also to wrap up on our initial point. The first one is as a team, be very self-aware. As a founder, as a team, be very aware of what you want to do. I mean, are you willing to, are you willing, or what you want is to create a global company that is worth hundreds of millions or billions? And if yes, are you happy, or are you okay with paying the price in terms of lifestyle that entails? Or the answer can also be no. I want to have a successful company, then doesn't go into that kind of doesn't even get close to that kind of valuation, and I'm still gonna be happy because Italy is a great place to live. That is fine. So be very self-aware in terms of be aware of what you as a founder and you as a team are aspiring to. The second one is do your homework. Do your homework means understand who you are, what your product is, what your ideas are, and what is possibly the best ecosystem to take you to the next step. Okay, because not necessarily, again, some ecosystems and are fantastic, they look fantastic on paper, but they might not be the right one for your product at that particular time, as in my previous example. So do your homework, study, talk to people, create your own ideas, obviously. I mean, come to your own conclusions, but don't go after the big names just because they are what you always heard at conferences. Okay, because I've seen that happening, and that was very expensive and very painful for a lot of people. And the third one is be patient, meaning despite of the word acceleration that we always use, and that is completely appropriate to what we try to do, not always anything, things take time, especially when they involve a different market, a variety of different markets in our case, because Singapore is a hub, is not a self-standing market. So you need to learn, if you operate in this area, if you go global from here, or if you operate in this area, you need to learn about 6 or 7 different cultures, 6 or 7 different financials and legal systems to be able to operate successfully. That takes time. So patience, homework, and awareness of your mindset, I think, are the 3 points that I would focus on.
I took note. Thanks, Marco. And Alfredo, your tips.
Yeah, so I think, if you are very serious about going global and you're committed to grow quickly, you need to really set yourself up to be attractive to venture capitalists, because that's where you are going to get growth capital. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars. And that's what you use to scale. So first of all, as I mentioned earlier, you need to look at all of the problems you're solving. You might be doing 5 or 6 different things to make money. Focus on the 1, maximum 2 of areas where you are solving the most amount of pain within your customers are spending money to make the problems go away. And you have to focus. And you look at the competitive landscape to see, are you solving a mosquito bite problem? Are you solving a shark bite problem? Investors want to invest in shark bite problems. So that is not an easy thing to do. It is also something that may require you hire new staff and get rid of other staff, but focusing on solving one main problem is an important one. Secondly is the team. We see many companies, especially from Italy and Spain and France, who have 8 founders, or they have 5 or 6 different angel investors. That's what we call a clean, attractive company. So try to keep 2, maximum 3 founders that are active in the organization, and keep the rest of the shares very, very, very clean as much as you can. I know this is difficult. Many companies from Europe get their original seed money from the government, but try to manage that process as much as you can. And then thirdly, as Marco said, you got to do your homework. You need to understand who the competitors are globally. Typically, your competition are other startups, and not the big guys. The big guys become your partners, or they become your exit, your part of your exit strategy. So those are the 3 things that we typically advise and help our companies to understand.
Thanks, Alfredo. First of all, I would invite all the attendees to raise any question and answer via the appropriate tool. I think it was very interesting, the point made by Alfredo on habits and culture of how many shareholders and the kind of governance that a startup should have. This is something that remind a very different approach and culture. Waiting for some questions, if any, because we were able to cover a wide range of topics during the discussion. I would invite again Marco and Alfredo to share with attendees and participants. I remind everyone that the records of this webinar will be available on the social channels of the Laboratori Aperti. About next event you will attend, or an interesting reading for our participants. Marco. Of course, Marco, online events, because we are not in a position today to have physical ones.
So I'm afraid I missed the question another time because of, despite Singapore being one of the best connected places in the world, my own Wi-Fi tonight is really giving me a couple of trouble.
Don't
You
worry.
You were asking about events?
No, I was asking Marco, waiting for some questions in case there are any, to share with participants and attendees, or the next events that you will attend or you will follow, or an interesting readings, articles, books, or any.
Ah, okay.
Okay. Connection doesn't help. Marco? No. Alfredo, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Next events that you will attend?
Yeah, so we are actually launching a webinar series. We've already done our first one on the topic of thriving in the storm. Our next one will be on Tuesday. Happy to share the link with you. We're going to feature 4 investors from Silicon Valley and 1 from UK that are going to talk about how the investment climate is changing as a result of this disruption by the COVID-19. So I think this is a very important topic, and there will be several more on this topic from many perspectives coming up. So happy to share that with you, and you can distribute with your colleagues.
Thanks, Alfredo. Please, Marco, are you back?
Hopefully, yes. In terms of Singapore, I have to say that in terms of the biggest events of the region, they at the moment that the direction is more towards postponing them rather than moving them. Things like InnoFest or FinTech Festival somehow. Those are 2 events. You can look at them up online. FinTech Festival, it's 50,000 people. InnoFest is about 14,000. Those are the biggest events where we also saw quite a lot of, especially at InnoFest, quite a lot of Italian participation in the past. And those are the events that we're going to. Those are the big ones. In terms of what we're doing, we are, as I said, for us, this is a slightly more recent development, and therefore we are now looking at launching this check-in program, which is specifically designed it's specifically designed for these times, like to get people equipped and ready before they can travel. And it's gonna be a combination of a 1-to-1 and a few panels, nothing too big, but that is our.
Thanks, Marco. Connection today didn't help so much. We didn't receive any Q&A, any questions from our attendees. I would like to thanks again Alfredo and Marco, their organizations, so Blue Spark and US Market. I think it was a pleasure to get back to you after a long time. With Alfredo, Marco, more often we have the possibility to have some exchanges. Again, you can find the records of this webinar on the social channels of Laboratori Aperti. Thanks to all the attendees. Thanks again to the staff of the laboratory, quindi a Giacomo, a Niccolò, a Elena, a Francesca, a Ilaria, a tutte le persone che stanno lavorando per portare le attività di divulgazione sui temi dell'innovazione da parte dei laboratori online, uno sforzo enorme che ha visto produrre un grande e interessantissimo palinsesto di attività. Con questo chiuderei la diretta su Facebook e il nostro webinar. Ancora un grazie a Marco e Alfredo. Ciao.
Grazie a voi, ciao.
Ciao.
Buona serata. Ciao.
Ciao Alfredo, ciao Marco.
Ciao.